In the shadow of Chicago's towering skyline, where loyalty runs deeper than blood and betrayal cuts sharper than bullets, a gang leader's perfect alibi was about to become his greatest nightmare. Marcus Steele Rodriguez thought he had orchestrated the flawless crime, witnesses, surveillance footage, and an unshakable story that placed him miles away from a brutal execution. But in an age where every digital footprint leaves a trace, Steele made one fatal mistake. He forgot that his luxury car was watching his every move. What the GPS revealed would shatter not just his alibi, but everything he believed about the woman he was trying to protect. The first rays of dawn painted Chicago's south side in shades of amber and shadow, casting long fingers of light across the abandoned warehouse district where hope had died years ago. The October air carried the bite of an approaching winter, and the wind whistled through broken windows of forgotten industrial buildings that once housed the dreams of working families. It was 6:23 a.m. when Raymond Styx Thompson, a homeless veteran who'd made these desolate streets his home for the past 3 years, pushed open the rusted door of Warehouse 47, looking for shelter from the morning chill. What he found instead would haunt him for the rest of his life. Devon Carter lay face down on the oil-stained concrete floor, his designer jacket soaked in blood that had long since turned dark and sticky. A single bullet hole marked the back of his head with surgical precision. This was no random act of violence or crime of passion. This was an execution, clean and methodical, carried out by someone who knew exactly what they were doing. Styx's hands trembled as he fumbled for the cracked cell phone he'd gotten from a shelter program, his fingers barely able to dial 911. Within minutes, the piercing wail of sirens shattered the morning silence, and the warehouse that had been Devon's tomb became a crime scene bustling with activity. Detective Sarah Chen arrived at 7:15 a.m., her black sedan cutting through the maze of police cars and forensics vehicles. At 38, Chen had spent 15 years working Chicago's most dangerous neighborhoods, and her reputation in the gang intelligence unit was built on an uncanny ability to see through the lies and codes that governed street justice. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and her sharp eyes missed nothing as she approached the scene. The warehouse reeked of rust, decay, and death. Chen crouched beside Devon's body, careful not to disturb the evidence markers that dotted the concrete like deadly flowers. The victim was well dressed, expensive sneakers, gold chains, and a leather jacket that probably cost more than most people made in a month. This wasn't some street corner dealer or petty criminal. Devon Carter had status, money, and enemies. "What do we know?" Chen asked. Detective James Walsh, her partner of 6 years. Walsh was a bear of a man with graying temples and the kind of world-weary expression that came from seeing too much human cruelty. Devon Carter, 26 years old, lieutenant in the Crimson Serpents, Walsh replied, consulting his notebook. Single gunshot to the head, close range, execution style. No signs of struggle, no defensive wounds. Whoever did this, Carter either trusted them or never saw them coming. Chen examined the body's position, noting how Devon had fallen forward naturally, suggesting he'd been shot while standing. The killer had gotten close, personal. This wasn't a drive-by or a random hit. This was intimate violence, the kind that grew from deep-seated hatred or betrayal. The forensics photographer's flash illuminated the scene in stark white bursts, capturing every angle of the crime. Chen walked the perimeter of the warehouse, her trained eyes searching for anything that might tell the story of Devon's final moments. The building had multiple entrances, several windows, and enough hiding spots for an ambush. But something about the scene felt orchestrated, planned down to the smallest detail. Time of death? Chen asked the medical examiner, Dr. Patricia Reeves, who was kneeling beside the body with her instruments. Based on body temperature and rigor mortis, I'd estimate between 10 p.m. and midnight last night, Dr. Reeves replied, without looking up. I'll know more after the autopsy, but this was professional work. One shot, perfect placement, instant death. As the morning progressed and the warehouse filled with investigators, Chen couldn't shake the feeling that this murder was different from the usual gang violence that plagued the South Side. The location was too isolated, the execution too clean, and the victim too prominent for this to be a simple territorial dispute. Someone had wanted Devon Carter dead, and they'd planned it meticulously. The investigation was just beginning, but Chen already knew one thing for certain. In a world where loyalty was currency and betrayal was punishable by death. Finding Devon's killer would require her to navigate the treacherous waters of gang politics, where the wrong question could get you killed, and the truth was always more dangerous than the lies. As she watched the medical examiner's team prepare to transport Devon's body, Detective Sarah Chen had no idea that this case would challenge everything she thought she knew about alibis, technology, and the lengths people would go to protect the ones they loved. By noon, the gang intelligence unit's office in the Homan Square facility was buzzing with activity. Chen sat at her desk, surrounded by case files, crime scene photos, and a steaming cup of coffee that had gone cold hours ago. The fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across the evidence boards that covered the walls, each one telling the story of Chicago's ongoing war between rival gangs. Devon Carter's murder had all the hallmarks of a professional hit, but in Chen's experience, even the most sophisticated killers left traces. The key was knowing where to look and understanding the intricate web of relationships that governed street politics. "Talk to me about Devon Carter," Chen said to Detective Rodriguez from the Narcotics Division, who had been tracking the Crimson Serpents for the past 2 years. Rodriguez was a compact man with intelligent eyes and the kind of street knowledge that came from growing up in these neighborhoods. "Devon was smart, ambitious, and dangerous," Rodriguez replied, pulling up a thick file on his computer. "Started dealing at 14, worked his way up through the ranks. The Serpents controlled territory from 63rd to 79th Street, and Devon was their point man for expansion. Word on the street is he was making moves to push north into Iron Wolves territory." The Iron Wolves. Chen had been expecting that name to surface. The two gangs had been locked in a bloody turf war for the better part of 3 years, with bodies dropping on both sides as they fought for control of the lucrative drug trade that flowed through Chicago's South Side. "Marcus Rodriguez," Chen said, stating the obvious conclusion. Everyone in the gang intelligence unit knew the name. Marcus Steele Rodriguez, no relation to Detective Rodriguez despite the shared surname, was the undisputed leader of the Iron Wolves. At 32, he commanded respect through a combination of strategic intelligence and ruthless violence that had made him one of the most feared men in Chicago. "Steele's been wanting Devon dead for months," Walsh confirmed, joining the conversation. "Devon's crew hit 2 of Steele's stash houses last month, made off with nearly $100 grand in cash and product. That's the kind of disrespect that usually gets answered with bullets." Chen studied the surveillance photos of Steele that covered her evidence board. He was tall and lean, with the kind of predatory grace that marked him as dangerous even in a crowd. His eyes held an intelligence that set him apart from the typical street gangster. Steele was a tactician, a planner, someone who thought 3 moves ahead of his enemies. "Let's bring him in," Chen decided, grabbing her jacket. Even if he didn't pull the trigger himself, Steele knows something about Devon's murder. The drive to Steele's known address took them through neighborhoods that told the story of Chicago's economic decline. Boarded-up storefronts stood like broken teeth along streets where children played in the shadows of buildings scarred by bullets and neglect. This was Steele's kingdom, a place where his word was law and the police were viewed as an occupying army. Steele's apartment building was a converted warehouse in an area that had been gentrified just enough to attract young professionals, but remained dangerous enough to keep them looking over their shoulders. Chen and Walsh climbed 3 flights of stairs, their footsteps echoing in the narrow hallway that smelled of cigarettes and desperation. The door to apartment 3B opened before they could knock, revealing Marcus Steele Rodriguez in person for the first time. He was exactly as Chen had imagined, tall, composed, and radiating the kind of quiet menace that made even experienced cops proceed with caution. He wore designer jeans and a black t-shirt that showed off the intricate tattoos covering his arms, each one telling a story of violence survived and enemies defeated. "Detectives," Steele said with a slight smile that never reached his eyes. "I was wondering when you'd show up. Heard about Devon. Shame what happened to him. We need you to come down to the station for questioning," Chen said, her hand resting casually near her service weapon. Steele's reputation for violence was well documented, and she wasn't taking any chances. "Am I under arrest?" Steele asked, his voice perfectly calm despite the tension in the hallway. "Not yet," Walsh replied, "but we can arrange that if you prefer." Steele laughed, a sound devoid of humor. "No need for drama, detective. I'll come voluntarily, but I should warn you, you're wasting your time. I didn't kill Devon Carter, and I can prove it." The ride to the station was conducted in silence, with Steele staring out the window at the city he controlled through fear and violence. Chen watched him in the rearview mirror, noting how he seemed completely relaxed, despite being brought in for questioning about a murder. Most suspects showed some sign of nervousness, fidgeting, sweating, nervous chatter. Steele displayed none of these tells, which could mean he was either innocent or exceptionally good at hiding his guilt. The interrogation room at Homan Square was deliberately austere, bare walls, a metal table and chairs designed for discomfort rather than relaxation. Chen had conducted hundreds of interviews in this room, and she'd learned to read the subtle signs that indicated when a suspect was lying. Steele, however, seemed immune to the psychological pressure that the environment was designed to create. "Where were you last night between 10 p.m. and midnight?" Chen asked, starting with the most direct approach. "I was with my girlfriend, Isabella Vasquez, at her apartment on the North Side," Steele replied without hesitation. "We had dinner, watched a movie, went to bed. You can check with her if you want." Walsh leaned forward, his bulk intimidating even across the metal table. "That's convenient. Your girlfriend vouches for you." "It's not just Isabella," Steele said, maintaining his composure. "Her building has security cameras. The doorman saw me come in around 8 and didn't see me leave until this morning. Check the footage. It'll back up everything I'm telling you." Chen felt the first stirring of doubt. In her experience, guilty suspects either had no alibi at all or weak ones that fell apart under scrutiny. Steele's alibi sounded too detailed, too verifiable to be fabricated on the spot. But something about his confidence bothered her. No innocent man should be this calm when being questioned about a murder, especially when he had clear motive to want the victim dead. As the interrogation continued, Steele's story remained consistent. He provided Isabella's address, the name of the building's doorman, even details about the movie they'd watched. Every answer came without hesitation, delivered with the kind of certainty that suggested either complete honesty or masterful preparation. After 2 hours of questioning, Chen was forced to admit that Steele's alibi appeared solid. But as she watched him walk out of the station, free to return to his criminal empire, she couldn't shake the feeling that Marcus Steele Rodriguez was hiding something. The question wasn't whether he was involved in Devon's murder. Chen was certain he was. The question was how he'd managed to create an alibi that seemed unbreakable. In her experience, perfect alibis were often the most imperfect of all. The next morning found Chen standing outside the Meridian Tower, a gleaming high-rise apartment building in Lincoln Park that represented everything the South Side wasn't: clean, safe, and expensive. The contrast between Steele's world and his girlfriend's couldn't have been more stark, and Chen wondered what had brought a gang leader together with a woman who lived in luxury overlooking Lake Michigan. Isabella Vasquez answered her apartment door with the kind of effortless beauty that graced magazine covers and turned heads on Michigan Avenue. She was petite, with dark hair that fell in waves around her shoulders, wearing designer clothing that probably cost more than Chen made in a month. But it was her eyes that caught the detective's attention, intelligent, calculating, and holding secrets that went deeper than her relationship with Chicago's most dangerous gang leader. "Detective Chen, I presume," Isabella said, her voice carrying just a trace of an accent that suggested Latin heritage refined by years of education and sophistication. "Marcus told me you might be coming by." Chen followed Isabella into an apartment that could have been featured in Architectural Digest. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of the lake, while modern furniture and expensive artwork created an atmosphere of refined taste and substantial wealth. It was hard to imagine Steele, with his street tattoos and violent reputation, fitting into this pristine environment. "I need to verify Marcus's whereabouts last night," Chen said, settling into a leather chair that probably cost more than her car. "He claims he was here with you." "He was," Isabella confirmed without hesitation. "Marcus arrived around 8 o'clock. We ordered takeout from that Thai place on Clark Street, watched a Netflix series, and went to bed around 11. He didn't leave until this morning after breakfast." Chen studied Isabella's face for any sign of deception. The woman seemed completely at ease, her story delivered with the same confidence that Steele had shown during his interrogation. But something about the scenario bothered Chen. It was too neat, too convenient, too perfectly timed to provide Steele with an unbreakable alibi. "What did you watch?" Chen asked, testing the details. "The new season of that crime documentary series, Criminal Confessions, I think it was called. Marcus finds them amusing, says they never get the details right about how real criminals operate." The casual mention of Steele's commentary on crime documentaries was exactly the kind of authentic detail that made alibis credible. Chen made a note to verify that the series had indeed released new episodes recently, but she already suspected Isabella's story would check out completely. Their conversation was interrupted by the building's doorman, a distinguished African-American man in his 60s who had been summoned to provide additional verification of Steele's presence. Harold Washington, yes, he shared the name with Chicago's legendary mayor, he noted with a smile, had worked security at the Meridian Tower for 8 years and took his job seriously. Mr. Rodriguez arrived at 8:17 p.m., Harold said, consulting a logbook that detailed every visitor's entry and exit. I remember because he always tips well, and he asked about my grandson's basketball team. Polite gentleman, not like some of the other visitors we get. Chen found Harold's description of Steele as a polite gentleman almost surreal, given what she knew about his reputation for violence, but she'd learned that criminals often compartmentalize their lives, showing completely different faces to different communities. Did you see him leave at any point during the night? Chen asked. No, ma'am. I worked the evening shift until 6 a.m., and I would have logged any departures. Mr. Rodriguez's car stayed in the visitor parking all night. That black Escalade of his is hard to miss. After leaving the apartment building, Chen made her way to the security office in the basement, where she was granted access to the surveillance footage from the previous evening. But the building's security system was state-of-the-art, with cameras covering every entrance, exit, and common area. The footage confirmed every detail of Steele's alibi. At 8:17 p.m., just as Harold had noted, Steele could be seen entering the building's main lobby. He moved with the confident stride of someone completely comfortable in his surroundings, stopping to chat briefly with the doorman before taking the elevator to the upper floors. Chen fast-forwarded through hours of footage, watching for any sign of Steele leaving the building. The cameras were positioned to capture anyone entering or exiting, and she carefully examined every person who passed through the lobby during the critical time frame. Steele didn't appear again until 9:23 a.m. the following morning, when he could be seen leaving with Isabella, both of them dressed casually and looking like any other affluent couple starting their day. The parking garage footage told the same story. Steele's distinctive black Escalade remained in the same visitor spot from 8:15 p.m. until he retrieved it the next morning. The vehicle never moved, never left the secure garage, and showed no signs of having been driven during the night. By the time Chen returned to the station, she was forced to confront an uncomfortable reality. Marcus Steele Rodriguez had an alibi that appeared absolutely unbreakable. Multiple witnesses, security footage, detailed timelines, and physical evidence all supported his claim that he was miles away from the murder scene when Devon Carter was executed. Captain Miguel Torres, a veteran of 30 years with the Chicago Police Department, listened to Chen's report with the kind of skeptical expression that came from decades of dealing with criminals who thought they were smarter than the law. "So we've got nothing," Torres said, leaning back in his chair with obvious frustration. "Steele walks free, while Devon Carter's family wants answers we don't have." "His alibi is too perfect," Chen insisted, pacing in front of Torres's desk. "In 20 years of police work, I've never seen a suspect with such a comprehensive story backed up by so much evidence. Something's not right." "Perfect alibis exist, Detective," Torres replied. "Sometimes the obvious suspect really is innocent. Maybe we're looking at this wrong. Maybe Steele didn't kill Devon Carter." But Chen couldn't let go of her instincts. Every fiber of her experience told her that Steele was involved in Devon's murder, even if she couldn't prove it yet. As she stared at the evidence board covered with photos of the crime scene, witness statements and timeline reconstructions, she knew she was missing something crucial. The perfect alibi was the key to this case, not because it proved Steele's innocence, but because it might be hiding the truth in plain sight. She just had to figure out how to crack it, and time was running out before the case would be reassigned to other detectives or filed away as another unsolved gang murder in a city where such violence had become disturbingly routine. 3 days had passed since Devon Carter's murder, and Chen found herself staring at a case that seemed destined for the cold case files. Steele's alibi remained unshakable, and Captain Torres was growing impatient with the lack of progress. The pressure to move on to other cases was mounting, but Chen couldn't abandon the nagging feeling that she was missing something crucial. It was Detective Walsh who suggested they take another look at Steele's impounded vehicle, Standard procedure required that any vehicle belonging to a suspect in a major crime investigation be thoroughly searched and processed for evidence, but their initial examination had focused primarily on finding weapons, drugs, or physical evidence linking Steele to the murder scene. The Chicago Police Department's evidence garage was a cavernous warehouse filled with confiscated vehicles ranging from stolen cars to motorcycles used in drug deals. Steele's black Escalade sat in Bay 47, looking pristine despite its current circumstances. The vehicle was a testament to Steele's success in the criminal underworld, loaded with every luxury option available, from leather seats to a premium sound system. Chen circled the SUV slowly, her experienced eyes looking for anything that might have been missed during the initial search. The Escalade was immaculate, both inside and out, suggesting that Steele took meticulous care of his possessions, but it was Detective Walsh who made the discovery that would change everything. "Sarah, you need to see this," Walsh called from the driver's seat, where he was examining the dashboard controls. "This thing has more technology than a fighter jet." Chen slid into the passenger seat and followed Walsh's pointing finger to a small LCD screen embedded in the dashboard. The display showed various vehicle information, fuel level, tire pressure, engine diagnostics, but it was the GPS navigation system that caught her attention. "This isn't just a standard GPS," Walsh observed, pressing various buttons on the touchscreen interface. "This is some kind of high-end tracking and navigation system. Look at all these menu options." The system was indeed sophisticated, far beyond the basic GPS units found in most vehicles. This was a premium package that included real-time traffic updates, weather information, and what appeared to be detailed logging capabilities that tracked the vehicle's movements with military precision. "Can we access the historical data?" Chen asked, feeling the first stirring of excitement she'd experienced since the case began. Walsh scrolled through the menu options until he found what they were looking for, a comprehensive trip log that recorded every journey the vehicle had taken, complete with timestamps, routes, and stopping points. The system was designed for fleet management and luxury vehicle services, providing owners with detailed information about their vehicle's usage. "Jesus," Walsh muttered as the data began to load. "This thing records everything: speed, location, duration of stops, even which doors were opened and when." Chen felt her pulse quicken as she realized the implications. If Steele had used his Escalade to travel to and from the murder scene, this system would have recorded every detail of the journey. Even if he'd tried to delete the information, forensic technicians might be able to recover the data from the system's memory. "We need to get this to the tech unit immediately," Chen said, but Walsh was already ahead of her, calling for a flatbed truck to transport the vehicle to the department's digital forensics laboratory. The digital forensics unit occupied an entire floor of the Homan Square facility, filled with computers, servers, and technical equipment that looked more suited to NASA than a police station. Detective Maria Santos, the unit's lead technician, was a former software engineer who had joined the police force after her brother was killed in a gang shooting. Her expertise in extracting digital evidence had helped solve dozens of cases that would have otherwise gone unsolved. "This is interesting," Santos said as she connected her laptop to the Escalade's computer system. "This particular GPS unit is manufactured by a company that specializes in high-security tracking systems. Banks use these to monitor armored cars, and some wealthy individuals install them for theft recovery purposes." Chen watched as lines of code scrolled across Santos's computer screen, the digital archaeology of Steele's recent travels beginning to emerge from the vehicle's electronic memory. The system had recorded every trip taken in the past 30 days, creating a detailed map of Steele's movements throughout Chicago. "The data integrity looks good," Santos continued, her fingers flying across the keyboard as she navigated through the system's databases. "This unit backs up its information to multiple memory locations, making it nearly impossible to delete without specialized equipment. Even if someone tried to wipe the main memory, we should be able to recover the data from the backup systems." As the extraction process continued, Chen found herself holding her breath. This could be the breakthrough she'd been hoping for, the piece of evidence that would finally crack Steele's perfect alibi. But it could also confirm his innocence once and for all, forcing her to accept that her instincts had been wrong. "Extraction complete," Santos announced, after what felt like hours, but had actually been less than 40 minutes. "I've got comprehensive travel logs for the past month, including the night of the murder. Do you want to see the preliminary analysis? Chen nodded, knowing that the next few minutes would determine the direction of her investigation. Santos pulled up a digital map of Chicago, overlaying Steele's travel patterns with different colored lines, representing various trips and time periods. "Here's October 15th, the night of the murder," Santos said, highlighting a specific date on the timeline. According to the GPS data, the vehicle was parked at the Meridian Tower from 8:15 p.m. until 9:23 a.m. the following morning. No movement whatsoever during that time frame. Chen felt her heart sink. The GPS data seemed to confirm Steele's alibi completely, providing independent verification that matched the witness statements and surveillance footage. But Santos wasn't finished with her analysis. "However," Santos continued, her voice carrying a note of excitement, "there's something unusual about this particular entry. The system shows the vehicle as stationary, but there are some anomalies in the data that don't match the standard patterns for a parked vehicle." "What kind of anomalies?" Walsh asked, leaning forward to examine the screen more closely. "Well, for one thing, the system recorded several door opening and closing events during the night, which is odd for a vehicle that supposedly remained parked and unoccupied. And there's something else. The GPS signal shows occasional fluctuations that are consistent with movement, even though the overall location data indicates the vehicle never left the parking garage." Chen felt her pulse quicken again. She'd learned over the years that anomalies in digital evidence often pointed toward deliberate deception. Technology was precise, and when it recorded inconsistent information, there was usually a human cause behind the discrepancy. "How long will it take to do a complete analysis of the data?" Chen asked. "Give me 24 hours, Santos replied. "I want to examine every byte of information this system recorded. If someone tried to manipulate this data, I'll find the evidence." As Chen left the digital forensics unit, she felt a renewed sense of hope. Steele's perfect alibi might not be so perfect after all. The GPS system that he'd forgotten about, or perhaps didn't know existed, might be the key to exposing the truth behind Devon Carter's murder. In the digital age, every electronic device was a potential witness, and Chen was beginning to suspect that Steele's own technology was about to testify against him. The question now was what story the digital breadcrumbs would tell, and whether that story would finally give her the evidence she needed to bring Devon's killer to justice. 24 hours later, Chen found herself back in the digital forensics unit, where Detective Santos had spent the night diving deep into the Escalade's electronic memory. The room hummed with the sound of computer servers and cooling fans, while multiple monitors displayed complex data analyses that looked like something from a science fiction movie. "You're not going to believe what I found," Santos said without preamble, her eyes bright with the satisfaction of a puzzle finally solved. Steele's GPS system recorded two completely different stories about that night, and when you overlay them, the contradictions are impossible to ignore. Chen pulled up a chair next to Santos's workstation, where a large monitor displayed a detailed map of Chicago with various colored lines indicating vehicle movements. The complexity of the data visualization was impressive, but it was the story it told that made Chen's heart race with anticipation. "Here's what the main system recorded," Santos explained, pointing to a green line on the map. "Vehicle arrives at Meridian Tower at 8:15 p.m., remains stationary in the parking garage until 9:23 a.m. the next morning. This data matches Steele's alibi perfectly and is what would show up in a basic system check. But there's a secondary logging system built into this particular GPS unit, a backup system designed for fleet management and insurance purposes. This secondary system operates independently and can't be easily accessed or modified without specialized knowledge." Santos switched to a different screen that showed the same time period, but with dramatically different information. A red line traced a route from the Meridian Tower north to Devon Carter's neighborhood, with multiple stops along the way. According to the secondary system, the vehicle left the Meridian Tower at 10:47 p.m., traveled south through the city, made several stops in the warehouse district, including a 15-minute stop at the exact location where Devon's body was found, and then returned to the apartment building at 12:23 a.m. Chen stared at the data in amazement. The two systems had recorded completely contradictory information about the same vehicle during the same time period. It was technologically impossible unless someone had deliberately manipulated the primary system while being unaware of the secondary backup. "How is this possible?" Walsh asked. studying the conflicting datasets with fascination. Someone with technical knowledge modified the main GPS system to show the vehicle as stationary, Santos explained. They created false entries that matched Steele's alibi timeline, but they didn't know about the secondary logging system that continued to record the vehicle's actual movements. Chen felt pieces of the puzzle beginning to fall into place. Steele's perfect alibi wasn't the result of innocence. It was the product of sophisticated planning and technical manipulation, but the technology he'd relied on to protect him had ultimately betrayed him. There's more, Santos continued, pulling up additional data screens. The secondary system also records biometric information from the key fob. This particular vehicle has a smart key system that identifies the specific key being used and can even detect whether the programmed driver is present based on proximity sensors. And what does that data show? Chen asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. Steele's key fob was definitely used to start the vehicle and disable the alarm system. The biometric sensors confirm his presence in the driver's seat at the beginning of the journey. But here's where it gets interesting. During the return trip, the sensors show a different biometric signature. Someone else drove the vehicle back to the apartment building. The implications hit Chen like a physical blow. Not only had Steele left the apartment building and traveled to the murder scene, but someone else had returned the vehicle for him. This wasn't a solo operation. It was a carefully coordinated plan involving at least 2 people. Can you determine who the second driver was? Walsh asked. The system doesn't store enough biometric data to make a positive identification, Santos replied, but it does indicate that the secondary driver was significantly smaller than Steele. Different weight distribution in the driver's seat, different reach to the steering wheel and controls. Chen thought immediately of Isabella Vasquez, with her petite frame and obvious intelligence. The woman who had provided Steele's alibi might have been far more involved in the conspiracy than anyone had realized. There's one more thing, Santos said, bringing up a final screen of data. The vehicle's entertainment system was active during both the outbound and return journeys. Someone was playing music, and the system logged which songs were played and when. The playlist data painted a picture of 2 very different personalities. The outbound journey featured hardcore rap and metal music, aggressive, violent songs that matched Steele's known preferences, but the return trip included classical music and jazz, sophisticated choices that seemed more aligned with Isabella's refined tastes. Chen felt the case finally beginning to make sense. Steele had indeed murdered Devon Carter, but he'd planned an elaborate deception involving GPS manipulation and a coordinated alibi. Isabella hadn't just provided false testimony, she'd been an active participant in the cover-up, driving Steele's vehicle back to the apartment building while he arranged alternative transportation or remained at the murder scene to ensure no evidence was left behind. We have them, Chen said, quietly, staring at the digital evidence that finally exposed the truth behind Steele's impossible alibi. The GPS system that was supposed to protect him had instead become the key witness to his guilt, recording every detail of a carefully planned murder that had seemed like the perfect crime. But as Chen prepared to arrest both Steele and Isabella, she couldn't shake the feeling that there were still pieces of this puzzle she hadn't uncovered. The GPS data proved their involvement in Devon's murder, but it didn't explain the why behind such an elaborate conspiracy. In her experience, the most complex crimes often had the most surprising motives, and she suspected that the full truth about Devon Carter's execution was even more shocking than the digital evidence had revealed. The arrest warrants were signed by 6 p.m. that evening, but Chen wanted to coordinate the takedown carefully. Steele and Isabella had proven themselves capable of sophisticated planning, and she wasn't taking any chances that they might flee or destroy additional evidence. The plan was to arrest both suspects simultaneously. Chen and a tactical team would take Steele at his apartment, while Walsh and backup officers would apprehend Isabella at the Meridian Tower. At 7:30 p.m., Chen stood outside Steele's apartment building with 6 heavily armed officers from the Chicago Police Department's SWAT team. The GPS evidence was damning, but Chen knew that Steele was intelligent enough to demand explanations and potentially dangerous enough to resist arrest violently. The arrest went smoothly. Steele answered his door calmly, showing no surprise when Chen read him his rights and explained the charges. His only comment was a slight smile and the words, "I told you that you were wasting your time, detective. I hope you have better evidence than theories and hunches." Isabella's arrest at the Meridian Tower was equally uneventful, though her reaction was more emotional than Steele's stoic acceptance. She protested her innocence tearfully, claiming that she had no idea what the police were talking about and demanding to call her lawyer immediately. Back at the station, Chen decided to interrogate Isabella first, hoping that the woman's obvious distress might make her more likely to provide information that would fill in the remaining gaps in the case. The interrogation room felt different this time. Chen had solid evidence rather than suspicions, and she was confident that the GPS data gave her the leverage she needed to break the conspiracy wide open. "We know about the GPS manipulation," Chen said without preamble, placing photographs of the data analysis on the metal table between them. "We know that Marcus left your apartment, drove to the warehouse district and killed Devon Carter. We know that you drove his vehicle back while he found another way to return to your building." Isabella stared at the photographs with obvious shock, her carefully maintained composure cracking for the first time since Chen had met her. The woman's hands trembled as she examined the route maps and timeline data that exposed every detail of their carefully planned deception. "This is impossible," Isabella whispered. "Marcus said the GPS system couldn't be traced. He said we were safe." Chen felt a surge of excitement. Isabella's statement was tantamount to a confession, acknowledging both her awareness of the GPS manipulation and her role in whatever plan they had executed. But it was what Isabella said next that changed everything Chen thought she knew about the case. "But you don't understand," Isabella continued, her voice breaking with emotion. "Marcus didn't kill Devon. I did." The words hung in the air like a bomb blast, reshaping everything Chen had believed about the murder and the conspiracy surrounding it. She had assumed that Steele was the killer and Isabella was merely an accomplice providing false alibi testimony. The possibility that Isabella herself had pulled the trigger had never seriously entered her calculations. "Tell me what happened," Chen said gently, recognizing that Isabella was on the verge of a complete confession. Sometimes the key to solving a case was simply listening while suspects unburdened themselves of secrets that had become too heavy to carry. Isabella's story poured out in a torrent of emotion and revelation that exposed layers of deception Chen hadn't imagined. Devon Carter wasn't just a rival gang member. He was an undercover federal agent who had infiltrated the Crimson Serpents as part of a long-term DEA investigation targeting both gangs' drug operations. Devon had been asking too many questions, getting too close to information that would have destroyed everything Marcus had built, Isabella continued, wiping tears from her eyes with shaking hands. But it wasn't just the gang operations he was investigating. Devon had discovered something else, something that would have sent me to prison for the rest of my life. Chen leaned forward, sensing that they were approaching the heart of the conspiracy. What did Devon discover? "I've been laundering money for the Iron Wolves for 3 years, Isabella confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. "My legitimate businesses, the art gallery, the consulting firm, the real estate investments, they're all fronts for cleaning drug money." Devon had traced financial transactions that connected me directly to Marcus's operations. The revelation hit Chen like a physical blow. Isabella wasn't just Steele's girlfriend providing a false alibi. She was a crucial component of his criminal enterprise, using her sophisticated business knowledge and legitimate cover to transform dirty money into clean assets. Devon's murder wasn't about gang territory or street respect. It was about protecting a multi-million-dollar money laundering operation. Marcus wanted to handle Devon differently, Isabella continued, her confession gaining momentum as the weight of secrecy finally lifted from her shoulders. "He thought we could discredit Devon, make it look like he was dirty, maybe even turn him. But I knew it wouldn't work. Devon was too smart, too dedicated. He would have brought down everything we'd built." "So you decided to kill him yourself," Chen said, the pieces of the puzzle finally falling into their proper places. "I couldn't let Marcus do it," Isabella replied, fresh tears streaming down her face. "If he killed a federal agent, they would never stop hunting him. The death penalty would have been certain. But if I did it, if it looked like a gang murder, maybe Marcus could survive the investigation." Chen realized she was listening to one of the most twisted love stories she'd ever encountered, a woman so devoted to her criminal lover that she was willing to commit murder to protect him, while simultaneously sophisticated enough to engineer a cover-up that had nearly worked perfectly. "Walk me through that night," Chen requested, activating the room's recording equipment to capture every detail of Isabella's confession. Tell me exactly what happened. Isabella's account revealed a level of planning and coordination that was breathtaking in its complexity. She had arranged to meet Devon under the pretense of having information about Marcus's operations that she was willing to trade for immunity from prosecution. Devon, believing he was about to flip a high-value asset, had agreed to the clandestine meeting at the abandoned warehouse. I told Devon I had documents that would prove Marcus was planning to eliminate him, Isabella explained. He came alone because he thought I was trying to save his life. When he turned around to examine the fake documents I'd brought, I shot him. The execution had been planned with military precision. Isabella had used Marcus's gun, knowing that if it were ever recovered, the ballistics would point to the gang leader rather than to her. She had worn gloves, a hairnet, and clothing that she burned immediately after the murder. Marcus knew nothing about it until I called him afterward, Isabella continued. He was furious, said I'd ruined everything, but then he realized we could use the situation to our advantage if we created the right kind of alibi. The GPS manipulation had been Isabella's idea, using her background in computer systems to create false data that would show Marcus's vehicle as stationary while she used it to travel to and from the murder scene. Marcus had remained at the apartment, genuinely watching Netflix and creating authentic digital footprints that would support their alibi story. The security cameras, the doorman, the building logs. Marcus really was there all night, Isabella said. We just made sure the GPS data would match his actual location while I borrowed his car to handle Devon. Chen marveled at the sophistication of the deception. Isabella had created a nearly perfect crime by combining digital manipulation with genuine alibi evidence, using Marcus's actual presence at the apartment to provide cover for her own murderous activities. But there was one final revelation that completed the picture. Isabella reached into her purse and withdrew a small device that looked like a sophisticated key fob. This is a GPS jammer, she explained. I used it to block the satellite signals during my trip to the warehouse, which is why the secondary logging system shows movement, while the primary system shows the vehicle as stationary. I thought I had disabled both systems, but I didn't know about the backup logs. Chen stared at the device, realizing that Isabella's technical knowledge had been both her strength and her ultimate downfall. The GPS jammer had successfully confused the vehicle's navigation systems, but it had also created the digital anomalies that Detective Santos had identified during her forensic analysis. As Isabella's confession concluded, Chen found herself confronting a case that challenged everything she thought she knew about criminal psychology. Isabella Vasquez wasn't a victim or an unwilling accomplice. She was a calculating killer who had murdered a federal agent to protect both her lover and her own criminal enterprise. The irony was almost poetic. Marcus Steele Rodriguez, one of Chicago's most feared gang leaders, had been undone not by his own actions but by the woman who loved him enough to kill for him. His forgotten GPS system, the technology he had relied on to provide the perfect alibi, had instead become the instrument of both their destruction. As Chen prepared the paperwork that would send both Steele and Isabella to prison for the rest of their lives, she reflected on the complex web of loyalty, love, and violence that had led to Devon Carter's execution. In trying to protect the man she loved, Isabella had ensured that they would both spend their remaining years behind bars, their sophisticated criminal enterprise destroyed by the very technology they had tried to manipulate. The case of the gang leader who believed no one could break his alibi was closed, but the GPS data that had revealed the truth would serve as a stark reminder that in the digital age, every electronic device was a potential witness, and even the most carefully planned crimes left traces that forensic science could eventually uncover. Devon Carter's death had been avenged, but the cost had been higher than anyone could have imagined, destroying not just the criminals who had killed him, but the entire criminal organization they had tried so desperately to protect.